Hi, y'all. Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual Speakeasy, where the bar is always open and the spirits are always served. Tonight, I have on stage a special guest. Her name is Debra Burris. She is a PhD physicist, meteorologist, witch, weather witch, artist, amongst many, many other talents, and a farmer as well. And so I will bring her on stage and let's get the party started.
Hi.
How are you, Debra?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Greg. Our viewers are starting to pop on. That's good. So, farmer first, grew up on a farm.
Mm-hmm. I did.
How did you end up being an engineer?
Honestly, I've always loved the sciences. And when I was a little girl, we didn't have a lot of money because when you're a farmer, you generally don't have a lot of disposable income, but there was always money for books. And my mother bought me the Little Golden Book of Astronomy and the Little Golden Book of Rocks and Minerals. So I was either going to be an astronomer or a geologist, and astrophysics won out. But I got really interested in the sciences in high school, and then in college, I live near a town that has a nuclear power plant, and they sent all the reactor operators back to school. And I thought, that sounds like a really hard thing, and I think I want to see if I can do it. So I decided to pursue their program in nuclear physics.
Wow.
Because why not? Let's do something really hard.
What?
And I went to school and got my bachelor's degree thinking that I was going to get married, work at the nuclear plant, and live happily ever after. I realized a couple of things. The first thing that I realized is I didn't really like the guy that I was about to marry. So thank you, Catholic Church, for your pre-marriage counseling, from saving me from that. I went, oh, I don't like you. Let's not do this. The second thing is I realized they were not going to hire a fresh out of school woman to work as a reactor operator at the nuclear plant. Now, this was, 35 years ago. Times have changed somewhat, but they weren't going to hire me. So I was like, well, I need to think of something else to do. And my academic advisor said, why don't you go to graduate school? You can go to graduate school and you can do other things. And I'm like, okay. And so I looked at one school, I applied and got in, and kind of the rest is history. I met my PhD advisor after my first summer there. And he said, you can combine your love of astronomy with your love of nuclear physics, because that's what I do in my research. And I was like, oh God, let's do that. Yay. And that's kind of how that all got started. But it was in graduate school that I looked for my connection. I realized my connections to other things beyond my love for physics. So that's where the next part of the story got started, I guess.
Nice. And so you got your physics in, you got your nuclear physics without having to work at the nuke plant.
Yeah.
Greg says, how I quit worrying and learned to love the bomb.
That's right. That's exactly right. I was really lucky that I met John, my PhD advisor, and because what he did is he looked at how elements are made in stars. So all the things that are here on the planet, the gold, the silver, the carbon, the oxygen, all of those things that are here were not made here. They were made in a previous generation of stars and then put back out into the interstellar material that our sun and planets were made out of. And I looked at him and said, you mean to tell me that I can study how nuclei and atoms get made? And he's like, oh yes. And I was like, really? Because one of my weird facts among many is I am super fascinated with the periodic table. And so I love to think about where those things come from. And in fact, the book I'm working on now,
it's a good thing to know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is. So the book I'm working on right now is actually going to talk about that quite a bit. So stay tuned. In 2026, there will be a second book that will be out that will have to do with the things that I just was talking about. So, yay.
So talking about minerals and elements, how does that relate to the Philosopher's Stone? I have to ask.
Well, I like to tell people that stars do alchemy. Sort of.
Yes.
They sort of do alchemy. What they do, the particular stars that I studied, is they take iron or things around iron like nickel and cobalt, things that are kind of close to iron on the periodic table, and in a split second at the end of their lifespan, they take that and they create the foundation that's going to turn into gold and platinum. All the gold and all the platinum on this planet were made in this one particular process called, and I don't want to bore you to tears here, but it's called the rapid neutron capture process. And that only happens in either massive star explosions or when you get weird things like two neutron stars that merge or a black hole and a neutron star that merge. So these really exotic environments, and all of it gets made that way. So the gold in your jewelry, the platinum in your jewelry, and about half of the silver in your jewelry are produced in these very unique, exotic environments that then it gets here. So so stars take iron and they go through this process, and one of the products of that process is gold. So that's not lead to gold, but it's pretty damn cool if you ask me. It's like, woo, that's
wow.
Cool. So,
but that also means that we don't keep accumulating gold. Is that true?
That's true. All that we got
because the planet's already made.
Yeah, what's here is here. But that's also true of carbon and things like that. We release it. Like we can release carbon from molecules and things like that. But that carbon, we're not making, unless you want to make some in a lab. I guess you can make it in a lab, but not an appreciable amount. What's here is what's here, kind of thing. So maybe we ought to start taking better care of what we got, is what I'll say about that. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you get from this to witchery?
Well, that going back to growing up on a farm, my parents didn't really realize it, but they were grooming a baby pagan, because my dad was always about respect the land, respect the life that lives here, take care of the water, take care of the trees, all the things. Then my grandmother, who was as a holy roller as you're going to get, had this book called 5,000 Years of the Bible. And when little Debra, who was incredibly inquisitive and also mildly belligerent, would start asking too many questions, my punishment would be to be put in a room to read that book. And I'm like, well, don't threaten me with a good time. Okay, I'm going to read this book. This is great. And one of the things in that book was it talked about the pre-Christian pantheons of gods, like the Sumerian gods and the Babylonian gods and the Egyptian gods and all these. And I'm like,
whoa,
what about these? What about these ones? What's this? And then my mother, who was very instrumental in my learning, because she grew up during the Great Depression and was the daughter of a woman who had lost her husband. So in order to keep the family together, they moved around a lot, and she worked in like odd jobs because, women were having a hard time finding work when even men couldn't find work during the Depression. So my mother got exposed to many, many different cultures all throughout the desert Southwest. And she's like, there's lots of different ways to think about things. And she encouraged me to read about stuff, and she loved me to read mythology books. So she would continually put books in front of me that expanded my thought. And so that kind of planted the seeds of all of that. And, you know, being raised in the environment I was raised in, there were a lot of unanswered questions. You know, I would go, or I would be, you know, drug basically to and I'm pointing because the church is right up the road here. My grandmother would take me and I'd be like, but what about this? And when they were like, no, don't ask questions. And I'm like, well, why not? Why not? Why can't I ask a question about this? And I got very, I got very dissatisfied with this idea of just accept. And then I got very dissatisfied with the fact that the role that women seemed to play was we fix the food, we put the food out, and then we eat last. And I'm like, well, why do women not get to teach the Sunday school classes? Well, that's not what women do. And so I had a lot of questions and dissatisfaction. And I always felt a lot more connected with nature and reading about these different pantheons of gods. And I was very interested in all of that. And, you know, through my college years, didn't think about it a whole lot. But when I went to graduate school, I met a couple of people and they're like, well, this is what you are. And one of the people I met was a lady named Georgia Rivas. She owned a shop in Norman, Oklahoma called the Four Winds. And then it was called Raven Feathers when she moved it. But she was very instrumental in opening my eyes to the fact that this is what I really believe. So how I connected that back to my science was I remember, well, two things. That mythology book that my mother got me was the Dolores Book of Greek Myths. And you've probably seen it. It's this very beautifully illustrated children's book. And there's this beautiful illustration of Gaia and the sky god, Uranus, I think was who they had it down as. And the stars and all the constellations and everything. And then, so that was always, and then in my second grade science book, there was a really cool 1970s rock poster illustration of a moon goddess. It was Selene, the moon goddess. And I started going, oh, all these things kind of fit together. But there was one pivotal moment in graduate school where I was taking my PhD advisor's class, and he was talking about the patterns in nature and how they repeat themselves from as small as the nucleus all the way out through the hyperstructure of the universe. And at the same time, I was reading a book called The Kabbalistic Universe, talking about the repeating patterns of the Kabbalistic tree of life. And I remember sitting there with that book on one side and my notes from class on the other side going, oh my gosh, it's the same stuff. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same. It's all the same. Everybody wants to act like these are two different things, and they're not. They're just two sides of a coin. And from then on, I was like, I have no problem saying these two things can hold hands and be friends. So that's kind of how that got started. And I've just kind of run with it ever since. So.
And then you went on to meteorology.
Yes. Meteorology was kind of my passion project. So after I got my job back here in Arkansas, I had an opportunity to develop a meteorology class because that had been my three great loves were astrophysics, geology, meteorology in terms of the sciences. And so meteorology had always kind of been my pet project. And I had friends in graduate school that were getting their meteorology PhDs, and who, if you know anything about Norman, Oklahoma, it's the weather capital of the world. That's near where the National Severe Storms Lab is. That's where the National Weather Service is. That's where they take tornadoes incredibly seriously out there. Like everyone watches the TV when there's a tornado, you know. So I lived out there for 13 years and was pretty well indoctrinated into the spirit of that. But when I got my job back here, I got the opportunity to develop a meteorology class. And so I was able to dig in and do some study, more deep study on that, and work on some research projects with some friends and do all of that. And the other part of that is I have always felt like the metaphysical community to be able to, I don't want to be taken seriously, but for the people who are like the science community, I feel like they don't take the metaphysical community seriously because they think they don't have the background knowledge. And I'm like, well, I can bridge that gap. I can stand in that gap because I'm in both of those. And so I can provide the background knowledge to this community, but I can also provide the maybe you need to open your minds up and quit being so narrow-minded to this community. So I started wanting to teach in the metaphysical community, showing how you could look at the science of, say, astronomy or meteorology or geology and go beyond just saying, okay, well, astronomy gives me astrology. That is true. But if you're an energy worker, there's a whole lot of energy in weather. There's a whole lot of energy in astrophysics. There's a whole lot of sources of energy in geology. And to me, energy is agnostic. It doesn't care where it came from. It's there for us to use. So if you understand it, then you can use it. So that's kind of how those things finally got woven together. So I took my love of meteorology and astronomy and geology, and I started trying to show people you can understand this stuff. You may not be able to do the calculational part of it, but you can understand from a conceptual perspective how weather works. And then if you understand that, your energy work can be stronger, or your magic can be stronger, because then you can say, aha, I understand what's going on in that storm over there, and I'm going to tap into that energy and I'm going to use it for this specific purpose. And so it enhances your practice, in my opinion.
For boosting up or creating chaos or calming down even, and having a still front and sedentary. Yes.
Absolutely.
I think, unfortunately, the science community is so limited and restricted within their own community. You know, there's a lot, I shouldn't say that's a real big generalization, but I think there's a lot of scientists out there that new ideas are not always welcome in the scientific community. And a lot of times those people are blackballed.
Yes.
Much the same as metaphysics, because, you know, heaven forbid you step out of the box of an out of the box thing. I mean, we're already out of the box, right? But then you step way out of the box and you get ostracized for being way out of the box.
Exactly. And, you know, I would agree that scientists tend to be very close-minded about things, which is a shame, because especially in astrophysics, open-mindedness and thinking outside of the box is what got us the ideas and the concepts that we understand. I mean, if you look at quantum mechanics, which, you know, that's going to be one of the next things that I probably tackle in terms of my writing, is, okay, if we're going to talk about quantum physics and magic, let's understand quantum physics a little bit better than we do. But
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, Erwin Schrödinger. Yeah, Erwin Schrödinger, who came up with Schrödinger's equation, and then everybody thinks they understand the thing about Schrödinger's cat. He did not. He just pulled that whole cloth out of the air. Einstein just pulled things out of his mind. I mean, so how is that any different than some of the things that we do in the metaphysical community? So I think that when science limits itself, it does it as it at its own detriment. It blocks development, it blocks new ideas, it blocks all those things. And I think the metaphysical community can do that too with their little gatekeepiness. I'm like, no, sit down. You don't have the corner on the market of being right about this. You don't get to dictate somebody's experience. No. So I think that, but I think the scientific community, I'm starting to see, though, and this is encouraging to me, I am starting to see a lot of crossover with people who are science-minded or who are scientists who are also part of the metaphysical community. So I'm starting to see a lot of crossover starting to happen, and that makes me very happy. But I think what it takes is people to be brave enough to stand up and go, hey, department, I'm a witch and I wrote this really cool book about weather magic, and there's a lot of cool science in it, and it's a good science communication piece. So perhaps you could take your blinders off for just a minute and consider what I'm saying. And that takes a certain amount of privilege to be able to do that. I mean, I have the privilege of being tenured and a full professor and secure in my job. So I have the latitude to be able to say, hey, I'm going to be so far out of the box that y'all are going to have to go over a couple of aisles to find me. So,
well,
but
and
I
that's
think,
what it takes.
yeah,
I mean, you have to be firm in your stance, because there's so much money and grant money and different things tied to different studies. Number
Mhm.
one, you have to be willing to fund a lot of it yourself if you're going to do a study, but you
Right.
have to also not be so scared of what you know and try to be able to explain it in scientific terms as well. We're watching this in the paranormal community. You have those people who are purely medium and esoteric based in their channeling, and they use no scientific equations. Yeah, push the envelope. Like, you have to be firm enough in your own stance. I know what I know from a metaphysical standpoint. Now,
Mhm.
tie in the equipment and tie in the science, part of it there, and try to prove what I know. And don't be so scared that you're going to disprove yourself by trying something new, because I run into mediums all the time that are like, they go out on investigations and they're like, well, I'm scared to use equipment, or I won't use equipment. I am completely energy based, and I do my thing through the metaphysical world, and I don't need the equipment. What are you afraid of?
Right.
You're going to prove yourself correct with the equipment.
Right.
Have enough
Well,
faith
and that's,
in your
I think
findings.
I think part of that too is science doesn't like to admit that 150 years ago, the concept of the electron was metaphysical. The concept of these rays and these ethereal things moving through space was really metaphysical. We didn't know that it existed because we didn't have the
Right.
technology. But then technology advanced and we went, oh, this is a thing. So I think that if we can just quit being so exclusionary and kind of snobby, for lack of a better word, that I think as technology advances, we are going to find out that these things are converging into the same thing. I mean, string theory says everything is just energy and these strings interact and these
Yes.
strings. So how is that different than doing magical manipulation or Reiki or prayer or whatever you want to call it? You're plucking on those energetic strings with
Right.
those same things. So I think that it may not happen in my lifetime, but within the next 200-300 years, I think we're going to see a convergence where people are going to be looking back going, look at how small-minded these people were, kind of like we look back 1,000 years ago with everybody thinking that the earth was at the center of the universe. And now we go, ha, 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 silly people. Well, they're probably going to be laughing at us too,
Well, sure they
500
are.
years from now.
Sure they are. I mean, we're just now figuring out that everything's vibration.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, way back in the Pantheon, before times, they knew that.
Mm-hmm.
How did we lose that in between? How did we lose that critical piece of something in between that ties everything in together?
Well, I have lots of thoughts about that, but I
well,
really
it was erased genetically, but that's a whole different.
Well, I really feel like some of it is because the way you control people is you keep them ignorant of their own
Yes.
power. And so you wouldn't want people to know that they have the ability to do that if you want to be able to use them for your own nefarious purposes.
Well, sure.
So
hence the
part of it,
fluoride and chloride in the water and the
so
things
yeah,
like
I
that.
think that a lot of times knowledge, I mean, what's the first thing they do when they take over a culture? They destroy the libraries, they kill the teachers, they kill the people that know the history and all that stuff. So, I think a lot of it happened that way. I think sometimes, I forget, my friend Ruby knows this author. It's a offshoot of Jungian philosophy where it's the shadow self and the golden self. I want to say Robert Johnson because I think it's the same as the blues musician's name, but there's an author who writes about the golden self and how we are more fearful of embracing fully our power and our light and our golden selves. And I think sometimes that can make people so afraid that they reject it so hard that we lose it. And so I think that part of it is that too. I think a lot of people are really afraid to embrace their golden selves and all that entails. So,
but that also means looking at the negative aspects of yourself and being aware of those and having to be held accountable and responsible for those things as well.
Right. Yes. And that's one reason why I am glad to be a witch, because I am responsible for my own stuff. If I do something and whatever I do, if I do harm, if I do injury, if I do good, if whatever, that's me. That's all on me. And I have to deal with the consequences of that. I don't get to go and supplicate to some deity to go, oh, please fix this for me.
No,
or
if it doesn't work that way. No. Although a lot of people think it does not work that way. We are responsible indeed for everything that we do.
Right. Well, and two, you can ask for the universe to open doors for you, but you've got to be prepared to walk through it. You've got to be standing at the door. You've got to reach for the handle and you've got to walk through it. Right. And if you don't do those things, then, the universe isn't just going to drop, things in your lap. You have, what I think Benjamin Franklin said, fortune favors the prepared mind. So you've got to be ready to receive those things. So you have to be proactive. You can't be, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of right now, but you can't just sit back and be passive. You have to be proactive. You have to be ready. And that's what I like about my particular practice is I try to be proactive in my practice, like I said before we got on the air, in 2022, I said, okay, universe, I want to be a public facing witch. I want to do these things. Mm-hmm. And the universe went, buckle up. You better be ready because we're fixing to dump a bunch of stuff in your lap. Yeah. So in 2022, I got my book contract. I got the ability I started making connections and, presenting at different events. And I met my partner who encouraged me to be a lot more proactive in the community and had connections in the community. So I wouldn't know you if I had not met him. I would not have ever crossed paths with you. And now I'm doing art and I'm doing all these things. And the universe went, okay, here you go. You better mean it. And I'm like, okay. So I couldn't just sit back and be passive. I had to step forward and step into that doorway and take that opportunity. So
I think that's a big thing too, is a lot of people don't understand. We ask for things, people pray for things, they manifest things, whichever format you use to get what you want. But they don't see it when it's there. They don't realize it, or it's not the format that they want it to be in that it comes in. Mm-hmm. When we ask for things, we don't know how it's going to come. I asked for things to be cleared and things cleared. That was not what I had anticipated in a million years.
Right.
It blew me off the seat of my pants. So I was like, whoa, shit, this is not at all what I expected. But I was ready and I'm dealing and I'm handling it. I didn't go, oh, wait a minute, that's not really what I wanted.
Yeah,
it was you asked for it and here it is. So take it and go and don't look back. And, so when you ask for things, it doesn't always come in the way we want it to come in.
Right. Well, and now probably 3 or 4 years ago now, I did an in-depth study with a group, an online group, some people that I had met at different conferences, and it was the Dark Goddess Intensive. And we were to select, the ultimate goal was we were going to work with a particular goddess or goddesses that presented themselves to us, and we were going to do oracular work with them, which I had never done oracular work intentionally ever. But I had a particular goddess present herself to me, and I was like, no, I can't work with you. You're not part of my cultural heritage. I don't want to do this. This feels weird. And about the fourth time, she went, hey, you're doing this. I'm like, okay.
Wake up.
Okay. And so the goddess is Dhumavate. She's a Hindu goddess, and she is a death goddess, but she's also the goddess who grants great boons and wishes after major disappointment. And when I realized that, when I found that out, I thought, well, that tracks, because every good, really dramatically good thing that I have in my life very often came after what I thought was a crushing disappointment. And it was a crushing disappointment, but it was not the end. And so I went, okay, yes, ma'am, I'm listening now. So I think that sometimes if you want to make space for growth, you have to give up something to make space. Right? Like you were talking about, you have you have to clear things out, and you don't get to decide sometimes what those things are.
No.
And so you best mean it when you ask for it.
Be prepared for what you ask for, and asking a different way does not always change the results.
Right.
You put it out there, and things will present. Much like your dark goddess, things will present for us to work with in weird ways. Yes. And so even if you don't get the desired result, you were in that string of vibration for that time you needed to be in it to achieve what it was that was the purpose of you being put there in the first place.
Right. And I think that for me, it's been anytime I've really paid attention, sometimes I doubt my own intuition. Like it'll be like something will happen and it will be, or some thought will come, and it will be so clear that is what I need to do. But then I'll be like, are you sure? Are you? And then the universe will like flick you on the head, go, yes, little bunny foo-foo, you need to do this, So,
yes.
So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you ask for this, and we're, here it is. So are you serious or not? And I feel like one of the things that happens is if you don't take it seriously and you don't pick up on those things, and you pick up on it, but you don't do it, the universe will go, well, you're not really serious about this.
Nope.
So we're not going to give you any more opportunities, for a while. You're going to get put in the naughty corner, until you start taking things more seriously.
Yep.
So
you asked and you didn't listen. I gave it to you 3 times and you didn't do anything with it, and I'm pulling it back now.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, figure out what it is you want.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why when in 2022, when these opportunities started coming up, and it would be these things like, for example, my friends said, you should pitch a book to Llewellyn. And I'm like, oh, I don't write books. Because I had thought about writing a book a couple of years before that, and I couldn't get going on it. I could never get traction on it. And I thought, well, that's not what I do. And my friends are like, Debra, stop it. You teach. You're a really excellent teacher. You know your material. It's just writing down what you know.
Right.
And so I did. I went in and pitched a book, and I got a contract. And one of the beautiful things that happened during that experience was my acquisitions editor, Heather Green, she told me about going into the editorial meeting with my draft and everyone looking at it. And the wife of course, Llewellyn was started in like 1901 or whatever, but the grandson of the founder of Llewellyn has passed on, but his widow was there. And she said, when she looked at that book, she said, this is the book he was waiting for somebody to write. And I was like, Oh, thank you,
What?
universe. I know. I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
I know that was a huge deal. That was a huge thing. So it was really a lovely thing. And then I'm like, okay. So I did write this book and these doors all opened. And then I had all these opportunities to present and I've made all these connections. And then, so that happened and it's been really well received. And then I came up with an idea for a second book and I thought, oh, I don't know. So I contacted my acquisitions editor and she said, yes, please. We want more books like that. So I'm like, okay. So early 2026, there'll be an astronomy and astrophysics book coming out. That's going to be very similar to my weather magic book. So that's exciting.
Yes, Weather Magic is the name of her book. It is purchasable on Amazon, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can get it through Amazon. You can get it through Llewellyn.com. Or if you're at an event where I'm at, you can get it from me directly and I'll be happy to sign it.
There you go. And our next event will be Conway, Arkansas in March.
Yep, Conway, Arkansas will be the next Enchanted event, which is and it's the let me just pull it up here on my calendar. So I will be, yes, we will be at Enchanted on March 28th, 29th, and 30th, and it will be a great event.
Come see us because we're both going to be there.
Yes. Now, I will actually be at the Enchanted pop-up. If anybody happens to be somewhat local, there's going to be a little pop-up on 1/11. So January 11th, 111, in North Little Rock, Arkansas. I will be teaching a class and vending at that with my art. And then 2 weeks later, if you're in the Dallas, Texas area, I'm going to be at the Green Man Holistic Fair. So I will be down there as well. So I am a full-time university professor, but somehow my side hustle of doing the art and the book stuff has kind of turned into a hustle.
Well, I mean, that's where you're supposed to be.
Yep. I've been to a lot of events and I've got a lot of events scheduled for 2025. So if you want to know where I'm at, you can either follow my art page, which is Stories of the Bones, or you can follow my author page, which is my name, Debra Burris. I think it's author, teacher, witch, or something like that. You can follow my author page and I'll put all my stuff up there. So, or you can follow me on TikTok if you like the TikTok, as long as it's around. You can follow me on TikTok.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So,
and I've got all the links in your bio too that are posted on on the advertisement too. So be sure to check Debra out on that. How do your colleagues at the university feel about the witch? University people are very open and liberal though, so that shouldn't be a question right there. Like that should just kind of go hand in hand, right?
I will say that outside of my department, I've had a lot of support. Like I'm involved in our what's called the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Academic Leadership as well, and I am one of the facilitators for our Teaching Excellence Institute in the summer. And I'm on the diversity and inclusion and equity team. And part of the reason that I'm on there is because of my spiritual beliefs. They want representation of different spiritual paths. Right. And I will say, and I do have a fair number of people within my college, so the science college, that have come out to events and have supported me and who are very supportive. It's a heavy lift sometimes with people to get them to understand this, and it hasn't been there. I'll just say that without going into too much detail, there has been a cost to me doing this.
I'm sure.
And I'm okay with that because I know I'm doing what I need to be doing. So, I mean, and somebody once told me, if you're not willing to have a little skin in the game or a little blood letting happen, you're not really serious about doing something. And I've stood up and taken a stand against a lot of things, and it has cost me, but I'm okay with that because I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So
right. Well, and let's keep in mind, for the people that don't know, you're in Arkansas. Yes. And we've had our conversations on this podcast about Arkansas. Bless its heart.
Bless it. I will say this: there are a lot of very open-minded, inclusive, thoughtful people here.
Yes. Yes, there are.
Unfortunately, there are also a lot of people who are not. And I kind of tread that. I get by with a lot where I live because I grew up here, and they've always known that Debra's a little funny turned, is how they describe it. She's a little funny turned, and that can mean everything from I'm gay to I'm a witch to whatever. It can mean a lot of things.
Sure.
And I pretty much live outside the lines on a lot of things, but because I grew up here, and farm people tend to be in general somewhat less judgy, because farm people know that you have to have community to survive. And when your barn burns down, or your cattle are out, or you need your hay put up because it's fixing to rain and your tractor's broke down, you don't really care about the political or religious affiliations of the people who show up to help.
That's very true. And you would be a fool to deny that kind of help at that time.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so what I have found is generally here, the true farm people tend to be generally quite accepting and tolerant of other points of view. They may not understand them, but they're not going to ostracize you or cast you out or try to change you, because we're all just trying to keep our cows in the pasture and things from not washing away in a flood. So
right,
I find that to be true. Now, yes, it is. I mean, it is. I have a lot of friends who are part of the LGBT plus community. I have a lot of friends who are people of color. This is a state where right now it's really not terribly safe, really, to be either of those things.
Right.
And I don't, but you know how things change as people like me stay here. We dig our heels in and go, we're not going to allow this. We are not going to allow you to do this. And as much as people go, oh, I'm going to move, I'm going to move, I'm going to move, I'm like, I'm not. I'm staying here to the bitter end. And because somebody's got to stay and fight the fights. So, but I will say this about this state. If you've never been here, it is an incredibly beautiful state.
Yes,
and
it
you
is.
can feel incredibly connected to nature. There are some magical and holy places in this state that, to me, you feel that liminal space, where you feel that connection to something bigger than what you can see with your eyes or sense with your five senses.
Very much so.
And I feel like the Ozarks are full of that energy because they're so old. And that's why I love living in the Ozarks, because
well, the trees and the rocks, I mean, the rocks themselves, the minerals have held so much energy and have so many stories to tell there. And
right. And we live, I just picked this up. We live where you can dig up the beautiful Arkansas quartz crystals. I live 2 hours or an hour and a half from where I can go with a 5-gallon bucket and a shovel, and everything I can carry, I can take home. So, Joel and I were talking about this one day, and I never really thought about this, and I don't know why, because it's incredibly obvious, but we were mining crystals one day, and he said, think about this. You are the first human being to lay hands on this when you dig it out of the ground.
Wow. That's intense.
You are the first person to touch it. And it's, to me, profound to think that I'm the person that birthed this out of the earth into the light. And I don't know why I've never thought about that, because yeah, that's true. But I never made that spiritual connection. So
that's huge too.
Yeah. He said that to me one day, and I just started to cry. I was just like, oh my God, you're so right.
No, it's beautiful though.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people understand that when you're digging, that that's the first human touch.
Yeah.
The first to feel that vibration. And that's not the vibration of another human being. Mm-mm. Well, maybe on top of that, there's been human beings that have walked on top of it, or, but actually had contact and energy and felt the purity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So now every time I go, it's a profoundly, I think now I go with different eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found some very powerful pieces that I then use in my artwork, or a couple of them I've kept, but I use them in my artwork or whatever. And the same thing with working with bones. I do bone art. And to me, even though I may not be the first person to have touched that bone, the fact that I can let that animal's spirit live on by honoring its existence,
Their
right?
essence, you're transferring the essence and giving it life back, or
Right.
purpose back. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It has become a holy project for me. And when I first started doing it, I was talking with Joel one night, and I said, why do I feel so tired and exhausted and all of a sudden so very sad? And he's like, because what you're doing is spiritual work, and you are taking on the energies of these things so that they can be remembered. And so I started doing, anytime I sit, this is my work, where I'm sitting is my workspace where I work on my art. And so now I have started doing more of a ritual approach to doing that. I don't want to say prayer, but I say something. I say a mantra. I light a candle. I cleanse the space. And when I pick the piece up to work on it, I try to think about the fact, try to honor the spirit of that animal when I work on a piece. So it's not just dollar sign to me. And
no, you're holding sacred space with that object.
Right. And he said something also really important to me, because we had went to some friends and they had two of my pieces hanging in their altar room. And he said, look at that. He said, you create things that people put in their holiest spaces. And
what a blessing.
Yes. I mean, it still gives me chills to think about that. So I hope that I can continue, to find that inspiration. But Greg said it, but you've never found a crystal. If you're ever in Arkansas, you should go dig crystals. Mount Ida, Arkansas. You can go all over the place, and
Where's
will
the best
find
place?
I personally like Twin Creeks. And for these reasons. Now, every mine has a slightly different flavor of crystal. Like there'll be some that have phantom crystals, and some that have chlorinated crystals, and some that have the super clear crystals. Twin Creeks to me has really beautiful clear crystals. But the thing that I love about it is you can park right by where the mining area is, and you can mine all day for $25.
Wow.
And you will get crystals. You will. I mean, as long as you're willing to stay out there, you will find them. It's not like going to the diamond, crater of diamonds, and maybe you're going to find one, but probably you're not. No, I promise you, you can literally drive down the side of the road in that area, and there's crystals in the ditches. I mean, they're everywhere.
Wow.
So, you will, it's the best $25 you'll ever spend. But Twin Creeks is one of my favorites. Wegner's is a really well-known one, and they have the phantom crystals, but they limit you on how many you can take out. Twin Creeks, if you're willing to carry it to your car, it's yours, kind of thing. So,
wow. So there's no charge for extra large stones or buckets or?
Nope. It's just how much you're willing to carry. Now, they also have, if you want to get into like their richer pockets, because they're still a commercial mine. So they have the public mine, and then they have a commercial side. They have where you can pay extra and get what's called a pocket, and they'll put you in an area where you're probably going to find the really super nice pieces. But I have found, and I wish I had it in here with me, I don't. Joel and I, the last time we went, we found one that was about that big. It was a double terminated quartz crystal that was about that big around and about that long.
Wow.
So
what a find.
It's a very special piece, and it's not going anywhere. We're keeping it.
And what a bonding experience for you and your partner too.
Yeah, we love it. So he and his wife have a business called Sticks and Stones. So he's mined crystals for years, and I was helping them out for a while. When we first started going out together, I was helping them for a while because, you know, you go to these fairs and it's nice to have an extra pair of hands sometimes, right? It's nice to have somebody give you a break if you need one or whatever. And I was making a few things and he was looking at my stuff and he goes, you know, you could do that for your own self. And I'm like, really? No. And he's like, yeah, you could. And I was very grateful because Chelsea was one of the first people who gave me a shot at actually vending at an event. And we, so I vended, the first thing I vended at was an eclipse event because, you know, we had the solar eclipse in Arkansas last year or this year.
Yes.
But then I vended at the June Enchanted and people really responded to my artwork. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's do more of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was put in your path again.
Right.
Things just you ask, and this is part of what's going to make you in the limelight as a witch.
Right.
You
And
know,
that's exactly what
part of that experience.
Right. And I've been very fortunate that for the most part, a lot of doors, I mean, I've gotten, you know, my share of rejections too, but one of the things that I feel good about and proud about of what I do is if you ever get me to teach a class for you, you're going to want me again because I'm pretty good at what I do.
You are. She's very good at what she does.
So, but
and she dummies it down for those of us that don't quite always, you know, understand.
I prefer to say make it accessible because nobody's a dummy. It's just people need it explained in a different way. So I make it accessible to everyone. So,
hi, Barb. Yeah, Barb, you should join us on some of these excursions. you need to come out to Arkansas with us and hang for a weekend for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Greg too, but Greg lives a little further away, I think.
Yeah,
I think. Could be wrong on that one. I'm waiting for the Scotland guy, Damien, to appear. He must have slept in this morning.
Oh,
it's morning in Scotland, and he usually pops on. I think it's 3 or 4 in the morning, and he'll pop on and say hi as he's drinking his energy drinks.
Yeah,
and starting the day.
Yeah,
so we've gone from farming to metaphysics to physics to back to metaphysics.
Yeah.
Work. What's your favorite thing to do?
Oh gosh. My favorite thing to do just in general is anything where I can smell horses.
Wow.
You know, horses. I love horses. Horses are a huge part of my spiritual practice. I raise horses. I have been an avid equestrian all of my adult life. I wasn't allowed to do it when I was a kid. So when I got an adult job with adult money and adult insurance, I said, now I'm going to do this thing. I raise horses. My favorite thing to do is to share my love of horses with people because horses are incredibly healing and incredibly magical and spiritual creatures to me. So I love sharing that with people, whether it's teaching them to ride or just letting them, you know, spend time in the presence of a horse. Horses are incredibly healing and incredibly magical creatures. So that's my very favorite thing to do. My next very favorite thing to do is I just like to be in the mountains. I just like to be in the Ozarks. I like to hear the creeks. I like to hear the wind blowing through the trees. I like to sit in a deer stand and watch the woods wake up and hear the sounds as the woods wake up. I like to walk around on my land and look for bones or interesting sticks or whatever. I heard an expression a few years ago, land tide. So where you are priestessing to your land, you are tied spiritually, emotionally, physically, however, to that piece of property, like it is part of you. And I really believe that to be true about the land that I live on, because I've always had a very deep connection to it. And I had my first sort of profoundly spiritual channeling or visitation experience on this piece of property, actually right out there the night before my grandfather died. And I saw one of my land spirits for the first time that night. She made herself known to me. And she is one of the ones that I frequently talk to, commune with, whatever, when I need to know what's the next thing I need to do out here. So that's
beautiful.
so those are my two favorite things. And then I like going to fairs and meeting people and looking at people's art.
They're so much fun.
Oh yes. And
They're so much fun.
I just and I try to approach everything, no matter how big or small, with a sense of openness and wonder and childlike wonder. I think we lose that childlike wonder of just being amazed and happy and fully embracing an experience as we get older, because we're afraid we're going to look silly. I went to the circus the other night. I sat on the front row at the circus, and I was so freaking excited to be there. And they're like, oh, for your tickets, you get to go take a picture with the little circus poodle dogs. I'm like, yes, I will do that.
Absolutely. Well, we forget to live like children, and we have inner children inside of us that need to be nurtured and need to have fun. And I'm always saddened by people at shows, weekend shows that talk about, well, I didn't make my money, or I didn't, it wasn't a great event. To me, almost every event, there have been a few that I cannot say were great events.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always some fuckery at some event, someplace that you just are disgusted and you want to leave. But most of the events that I go to, I have so much fun.
Right.
It's nice to break even. It helps, right? It helps.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm not there just to make money. I'm there to meet people, and I'm there to shop. Like my inner child, I'm happy at fairs. I love to shop. And I love to bring home new things that I don't need anymore, but I want them because they're pretty and they shine and they have meaning to me. Mm-hmm. And the ability to be able to do that is fantastic, and I'm blessed.
Oh, yes. I have a different attitude. Like, I have friends, like my partner, that's their job. And so I understand when they get down if they're not, because they got to pay their bills and they got to feed their kids and all that. But even then, he even told me, he said, I always can come away from a fair with some valuable experience, even if I don't break even if I don't make money. Like, I think I met you for the first time at a show last year in Eureka Springs.
Yes.
That was very slow and very, but he and I had the best freaking weekend, and we met interesting, cool people, and we had Reiki done, and it was very profound. And we just had these beautiful, wonderful experiences with people. And even though I know he was disappointed because, they need to pay their bills.
Sure.
He still is able to put a positive spin on it and go,
well, and that's what it takes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what it takes. You've got to find the good in all of it. And hi, Carol. And Greg, I wish we had more land and we were out in the country. Those of us that are not out in the country wish we could have that bond with the country land. And you can bond with your city land too. It's just not as profound, I don't think. Not with the neighbors watching. It's not the same kind of bond.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I will point out about my book, Weather Magic. Weather is accessible to everybody.
Yes.
Weather is available to everybody, whether you live in the city or in the country or wherever. And really, all weather is accessible to us because we're all connected by this ocean of air over us. So one way you can connect to nature, even if you live in an apartment, is you can work with weather. You can work with the weather and build that bond, that connection to that. And I'm very fortunate that I live on 170 acres. And so I've got my land that I've lived on since I was a child. And, my whole growing up life, I've lived here. My animals that died when I was a kid, I can tell you where they're all buried. They're all here. And, so that, but I will say one of the things that I tried to really do when I wrote my book is to make sure that everybody has access to working with weather and the energies of weather, regardless of where you live, regardless of if you don't live in an area where it snows, there's still snow somewhere.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
So
I love storm work. I love to go out when the lightning's flashing. I have a covered back deck, and I love to go out on the porch and light candles and call in different things and talk to different things. And that's my weather moment, is when the lightning's cracking all around and the thunder's booming and the rain's just moving in to put everything down back into the earth. You can do some really strong work and know it's going to get squashed when it needs to get squashed with the rain, and buried and snuffed out when it needs to be carried, and all those different things with that. It's beautiful.
And the more you know about the science, the more effective your work can be.
I learned that. I actually went to a witch school, an international school for almost 2 years, and had to learn about the whole quantum physics and the holographic stuff. And it was like, my son's trying to explain this, how it comes in and then it refracts and it goes out. And he's like, you're making this like way too hard. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm too old for this. It's 62. It's not, I just have troubles with it. I don't have troubles anymore with the chemistry table. I don't have troubles with alchemy. In my young days, chemistry, 4 times to pass basic chemistry. Although I had 2 professors that lectured on their girlfriends and what they ate for breakfast and how many times they shit every day. But that was beside the point. It was like,
that's probably less about you and more about them.
And I would take the tests, and I'm like, well, we didn't talk about these equations. I could tell you what you ate for breakfast 3 days in a row, but I cannot tell you what this means. Now I understand the chemical table, the periodic table, and all of that. I get that now. But yeah, science is just, it's hard. It's hard.
Okay, I will say this. Most of the time when people say they don't like science, they have had a negative experience with a teacher.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that is really important to me is science communication. And to be an effective teacher, you need to be able to teach even the most challenging of subjects to a second grader. If you can't explain it to them so that they get at least a conceptual understanding of what you're talking about, then you're not doing your job.
And a lot of them didn't.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's one of the, unfortunately, the rule of thumb, usually, especially with science teachers, is either, in a large part, they're not taught how to teach people.
No, and they were foreign, so we had an English barrier on top of it.
Right. Well, even the ones that were English speaking often knew their subject incredibly well, but they had no idea how to communicate it to people. You know, they had no idea how to read the room and have a way to be able to communicate effectively that material. And so that's one of the things that I try to do with my students. I'm like, look, you're going to be somebody's science expert someday. It may be your mama at Thanksgiving dinner. It may be your, I've had people stop me in the grocery store asking me about a pain in their side. I'm like, honey, I'm not that kind of doctor, but I think you have this going on, just because I know a little bit. So you're going to be somebody's science expert. Be a good one. Be an effective communicator and know at least your subject well enough that you can explain it to them. And the other thing is know how to look things up from reputable sources, know how to find information that is reliable and verifiable and things like that. Because I have a friend he's an intelligent guy. He graduated from high school, but he is an incredibly intelligent guy. But he'll ask me these questions and I'm like, well, you can just look that up. He's like, no, you're my looking up person. You know how to look things up where you'll actually get the information.
You explain it better.
Right. So
it's all an explanation.
Yeah.
Carol says, I love the smell of dirt right when it starts raining. Yes.
Oh yeah. Petrichor.
And ozone too.
Yeah.
And Greg says, do you talk to the storms when they are wrapped around you? I do. Do you? I do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I talk to him. Well, it depends. Yeah. I'll talk to him before, during, and after. It depends on like my protection work. A lot of times I would love to, I love the pretty tools too. And I've got a bunch of them, but 9 times out of 10, when I'm doing protection work, like if there's storms coming and I need them to not, I'm out there with a wooden spoon and a pot banging on it going, not today. We're not doing this today. You need to go somewhere else. But I do I do try to interact with a storm when I'm doing the work with it, because I'm an animist. I think everything has spirit, soul, whatever you want to call that thing. And so I would like to believe that if I'm going to utilize this storm, that I should show appreciation to it, right? Even if it's, blowing the roof off my barn, it's,
Yeah.
it's doing what storms do, right? You can't be mad at a storm for doing what storms do. But yeah, I do. I consider everything to have an energetic soul, if you will, for lack of a better word. And so I think that you can communicate with the storms.
Oh, for sure. For sure. We had a gig in, oh shoot, I can't remember if it was Kansas or Independence. I can't remember. It was a Metacon, and we had a concrete building, and we had a ton of stuff going on, and we had vendors that started bickering and started a fight. I think I've told this story before, but there was a fight between vendors. Well, there was a couple fights between vendors, and one of them ended up with having a vendor walked out by the police department because they took a swing at another vendor in a bathroom stall. It was a whole stupid thing, and it was crazy, and the energy was crazy, and we couldn't get the building. It was a concrete building, and a storm was kind of emerging anyway. And I remember thinking, there are people in this place that are just awful. Like their energy was just so bad. And you get a bunch of, 100 and some metaphysical and paranormal people in a building that do not clean. And it's just terrible. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm done with this. Like, it just started and I'm done with this. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm calling in my stuff, and I'm calling in the storm. And I'm just like, yes, we need a good storm. We need a good one right now. It needs to come and clean the whole area. Just needs to wipe through. Well, unfortunately, a tornado came through. It was a little stronger than what I'd wished for. And it knocked some of the power out, not in our building. It came off. It went back on. But the neighborhoods were out like till the next day. There was some damage. But what was amazing was the energy cleared right up, and the show ended up being a very successsul show.
Yeah.
And it felt a lot better afterwards. And I was like,
and that's the thing.
More than I reckoned.
I mean, that's another thing about accepting consequences. When you do magical work, there are consequences. Whether it's good or bad, there are consequences. Like when you do work for a job, and you get that job, well, somebody else didn't get that job that might have also wanted that job or needed that job. So you have to live with the consequences of it and go, okay, well, sorry, but, didn't mean for that to quite happen, but okay.
There is not always a do no harm, people.
Right. It's not always
so frustrated with that, because the other side of what you've asked for, if you got it positive, the other side is always going to be negative. There's that balance. And so to say and do no harm, harm is always going to take place.
Right.
Whether you mean for it to, or you don't mean for it to.
Right. I mean, what's chaos to the, what is normal to the spider is chaos to the fly. Right.
Yes.
And so I think it's lovely to strive for that. And like, I'm not going to intentionally cause harm. Well, I'm not going to say that, because I have done Bane work. I'm not going to lie. Yes. I mean, I have done Bane work, because I heard, Georgia and a couple of other people who I profoundly respect, including Byron Ballard and Dorothy Morrison, all say a witch who's not willing to hex is not an effective healer.
That's true.
And I live my life by that standard. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I'm not saying I'm not going to do it. Right. But you have to understand that that's part of the balance, right? That's part of that balance, in my opinion. So.
And Dorothy Morrison she was very wise when it came to that. She is very wise.
Dorothy Morrison is my hashtag witch goals. I've known her for about 30 years. And the first time I saw her, and I adore her, she's an elder in the same tradition that I'm an elder in, although neither one of us practice it, but I love Dorothy. We've been friends for a long time. And I remember the first time I met her was in Oklahoma about probably 30 years ago at a thing called Spirit of Spring. Used to be up in northwest Oklahoma or northeast Oklahoma. And we were up there, and this lady was talking about, oh, her husband wouldn't finish the kitchen remodel and he's dragging his feet and this and that. And she's like, what magic can I do to get him to finish this kitchen remodel? And Dorothy's from Texas originally. So she's got this Texas drawl, kind of like I have my Southern drawl. And she goes, and she stands there, and there's the look on her face is priceless. And she looked at her, she put her hand on him and goes, honey, you don't need any magic for him. You need to hire that done and charge his credit card. That's what you need to do.
I went, I can see Dorothy standing there saying that.
I love you so much. So, because she's like, save your magic for things where it's actually the thing you need to do. That is not a thing that you need magic to fix. That is just, you need to hire that done. And I'm like, I love you.
With his credit card.
Yeah. I love it. I fell in love that day with Dorothy Morrison, and I've loved her ever since. So
she is awesome. She is a wicked lady.
I love her.
In a good way. In a good way.
Just so what I love about her is she's just a freaking practical witch. She doesn't pull her punches. She's like, this is the things, and if you want to do it, you better ask for it. You know, she has always been sort of one of my mentor #witch goals people, you know. Sure. So yeah, and
her products work really well.
Oh gosh, yeah, I've got a lot of her
candles.
stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yes, I've got a lot of her candles, and I've got a lot of her spray. Like one of the things I use at my booth, and I'm about out of it, which makes me very sad, is her hot damn spray, because it's a luck thing, and I use that, and man alive, it is good stuff. And I use her protection stuff actually at my work. I have my office warded so that not too much stuff comes around.
Good for you. We have to do that. I keep my house warded too. We have to. Does anybody have any further questions? Tonight has flown. My gosh.
I know. This has been great.
This has been fun. We're going to have a part 2.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm always down for talking about
this conversation has just been too fun. You can't have too much fun on a podcast, but it's lively. And I love that. I love the energy. The energy has flown tonight.
No, thank you. I'm really glad I got to do this.
Thank you. Glad. Yes. And we will do a part 2 really soon, because now we got another whole thing we got to talk about.
Absolutely.
And you talked about horses, and so you and I need to have a conversation about horses too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I have an awesome book written by a horse trainer who was a paranormal investigator in I want to say the 40s and 50s, and she was grant funded by the University of Missouri for seances.
Oh, wow. That sounds really awesome.
And speaking through positive spirits through the equine services department. Mm-hmm. And she was a horse trainer. She and her husband were horse breeders and horse trainers. And one of the best metaphysical workers, 90 some years old. She's passed now. She was a veteran. Mm-hmm. And she was an amazing, and I've got the book. I'll have to share it with you, because she gave me a copy of it before she passed. I was her nurse, and it was a very amazing story. But I also have a tremendous phobia of horses, which is another whole thing, because they have really big teeth, and we're gonna have to
I have some mini horses. They're not so big.
Oh my God. Yeah, big scare. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you so much. I'm going to take us down now. You hang on. And everybody else, thank you. Good night. God bless. Goddess bless. Everybody bless.
All the bless. Yes.
All bless. Happy life. Have a happy week ahead of you. And sorry, Carol. It's okay. Watch the replay. It was very interesting. A lot of cool stuff on it. And catch us next week. Thank you guys. Good night.
Ha 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 ha.